Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome an accomplished author and a well-known and respected blogger from Maryland, USA, Mr. Pete Wiley. Pete, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Pete is an author. He has a blog titled Blocks of Life about intentional living, about understanding what makes us tick and taking the initiative to act on that knowledge. So, Pete, before we talk about Blocks of Life, a few questions for you personally. Tell me about your journey and how have your varied interests and experiences shaped the way you look at life and people?
Well, it's interesting, as I was coming through my formative years, it really occurred to me how special life is. It's truly something that
Mm,
that if you're open-minded and if you are proactive about life, you can really make life something truly unique and special. I like to think of it as life is a diamond, and people are the facets of the diamond.
mm,
And if you think about it that way, I think then you can always take any moment that you're having and make it special
mm,
through really recognizing kind of the
mm,
life that you can have.
mm. Well said. What are the turning point that made you want to channel your insights into writing, poetry, music, and videos?
Well, I had been writing a long time. I really am interested in life. I'm interested in how to live a meaningful life. So I had been writing a long time, and my writing eventually became my blog and my books. But there was always some nuance that was missing. So when I was thinking about my writing, I was thinking, how can I really tap into the emotions of
Mm,
people who are with me? How can I really express emotional nuances? So I was also a musician my whole life,
mhm,
and with my musicianship, I was a poet, through
mm,
lyrics and then poetry. So I thought, through my music and through poetry, I could really make people feel the ideas, and to me, that those feeling of the ideas to express that emotional nuance, for
mm,
me, that really helped the audience kind of I guess tap into these ideas in a way that's way more meaningful than.
mm,
And then later on, after that had been going a while, I really wanted to kind of take it to another level, and I started making social media videos. And for me, that was a way, where they could almost be with me one on one, so
mm.
where I could be talking and they can see my body language and they can see how I emphasize different
Yeah.
things. And through the engagement with these videos, it was really like having a conversation with the audience. So it was much more personal, I
Mm,
think.
well said. And if you could describe your personal journey in three life building blocks, what would they be?
Yeah, so I think for me, the biggest building blocks of my life, because I've thought about this a lot with my writing. For me, the first is connections. I
Hmm.
think
Yeah.
the way I interact with people is what really makes my life special and interesting and challenging and all those things.
Mm,
So I think the first block would be connections. The second would be adventures, and I
hmm.
say adventures here in kind of a specific way. I don't mean, climbing
Yeah.
Everest or adventures like that, but I
Mm,
think if you're open-minded and if you really are mindful of every moment, any moment can be a little adventure. You can
mm,
you can challenge yourself, you can test yourself in any moment, and then staying outside of your comfort zone is a way to achieve personal growth, but
mm.
it's also a way to uh, to kind of have an adventure on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And then finally, I think life's work is another block that for me is key. And your life's work can be what you do for a living, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. For me, life work is what taps into your heart and soul
Mm,
and gets you really to a place where this is what I was really kind of put here to do. So
mm.
for me, those are three life building
Fascinating.
blocks that are
Fascinating.
kind of key.
Fascinating. Thank you for sharing these. Let's now talk about your blog, Pete. Blocks of Life. What inspired you to start Blocks of Life, and why did you choose the metaphor of blocks to represent elements of life?
Well, it's interesting. When my son was too young to really understand some of these ideas I was
Mm,
thinking about,
mm,
I started writing out these ideas for my son to remind myself to talk to him about them later. So I had been writing these down for some time, and eventually it became less about kind of reminding myself to talk to him
mm,
and more about exploring these ideas myself.
mm,
And so I got into just a regular habit of thinking about a meaningful life, about
mm,
thinking about intentional living, and just kind of constantly writing about them. And the blog was a way to kind of share that with people, but
mm,
also to get other people's ideas, to kind of get a community of people who are interested in this
mm,
going to
mm,
kind of have a back and forth about them.
mm.
And to me, the blocks of life idea began with the notion that everybody has different aspects of their life that they're
Right.
trying to fit together in a way that works, in a way that's meaningful. And
Mm,
so for me, like the building block, you're using building blocks to build the life you want with
mm,
all these different aspects of your life kind of made
mm,
sense.
mm. And you use the term intentional living. How do you define intentional living, and why, in your view, is it important today?
Yeah, to me, there's really, I would say, four pillars of intentional living. The first is being the navigator of your life. So you are in charge of where you
Mm,
go, and where your life takes you.
mm,
You are in charge of that. You are navigating your steering, your own life, and so remembering that helps you to really live the life that you intentionally want to live.
mm,
I would say the second pillar is to be yourself. People are often in a situation where there's certain expectations put on them by teachers, coaches, other people that say,
mm,
"Oh, this is what you really need to do." But to live an intentional life, you have to have that come from within. Your core self
mm,
has to tell you what you need to do to be able to live the life that you want.
mm.
The third is to seek experiences.
Yeah.
It's really easy to just kind of engage in whatever comes up and to just do whatever happens that day. But if you seek experiences that are associated with your passions, that will challenge you, that will test you, that will help
Mm,
you achieve personal growth, that's the intentional way of having experiences.
mm.
And I think the fourth, and perhaps the most important, is to be open.
Right.
Everybody is going to have their kind of comfort zone and things that they understand and things that they've been exposed to. But if you're open to other ideas, and you're open to the unfamiliar, and you think about life as a constant way of kind of learning about new things, that will give you a much richer life and a much more meaningful life. So
Mm.
to me, those four things are really the
Yeah,
the
what a
key to
great
living an
response. What a
intentional life.
great response. Thank you. Pete, how do you see the difference between a balanced life and a life of harmony?
So I think both are important, but they are different. To me, a balanced life, um, I think when we are living our lives, it's very easy to focus on the things we have to do. We
Mm,
have to earn a living. We take care of our family, and the things that we love to do. So we have our passions, and it's very easy to jump into those. I really love to do this, whatever it is, a hobby or a
mm,
calling. But a balanced life also includes experiences where you test yourself, where you get out of your comfort zone,
mm,
where you're not necessarily happy all the time because you're really struggling and you're really challenging yourself, and
mm,
there can be pain associated with it.
mm,
So a balanced life includes those things and the things that you love to do, have to do. And a balanced life to me really has a lot of benefits. One of which is if you only stay with the things that you have to do or like to do, you can really get into a rut.
yeah.
And so a balanced life helps take you out of this rut and can help you to come at things fresh.
Mm,
Now, a life of harmony is one where all of the things you do are consistent with your values, with your goals, and with the vision you have for your life.
mm,
So if you're ever doing something and you think, oh, I don't know why I'm doing this, or I don't feel comfortable doing this, or I don't have time to do this, that could be a red flag about
mm,
maybe you don't have a life of harmony because something is out of whack.
Hmm.
And so you can kind of reflect on that and think, well, what can I do to get my life back into harmony?
Hmm. Very interesting. What role does self-reflection play in building a life of meaning? How can people begin to identify the building blocks of their own lives?
So I think that self-reflection is such an important aspect of a meaningful life, of an
Hmm.
intentional life, for a couple of reasons. One is that it really helps to get you to get to know yourself. So if you have self-reflection, you can think about kind of what comes up in your mind, what's in your heart,
Hmm.
and you can kind of truly be more and more aware over time of who you are and what aspects of life are meaningful for you, what activities, what blocks of life are meaningful for
Hmm.
you.
Hmm.
Another aspect of self-reflection that's important is that it helps you understand your experiences.
Hmm.
Like I had this emotional reaction when I was doing that. Why did I
Hmm.
feel that way? Why did I get irritable in this experience? Why did I get upset? So it can help you really understand how your experiences interact with you.
Hmm.
And then finally, it helps you to process your challenges. Everybody has challenges and heartaches in their life, and self reflection helps you really think through those. Why
Yeah.
did that happen? Why did I feel that way?
Hmm.
So I really think self reflection is key to understanding yourself and to identifying and figuring out what blocks of your life are the ones that are appropriate for you, are the
Very
ones that are
interesting.
meaningful for you.
Very interesting. Do you believe people can truly reinvent themselves, or is it more about reshaping what is already there?
Well, I think everybody has their core self, their
Hmm.
self who they are in their heart, and I also call that the essential self, the self that is left when all
Hmm.
of the extraneous stuff is swept away. So I think that part of yourself will always be with you. And the way I like to think about it is the core self is like the foundation of a house.
Hmm.
You build a house and you can completely remodel the house. You can change the color. You can change it from old fashioned to modern. But that foundation of the house will always
Hmm.
be there. So you can really change a lot of the things about your life. You can
Hmm.
really change almost everything about your life.
Hmm.
But it's also a reshaping because your core self is there as well. So there will always be you, no matter how much you're changing what you do or even the way you think, because
Hmm.
that goes back to being open-minded. You can say, "Oh, these are these are the values I really care about." You can say that as maybe a 20-year-old, but then as life experiences happen and you're open, things can change, and being open is kind of key to that. And
Hmm.
that gets back to, does it relate to your core self? How does it relate to your core self?
Hmm. Wow. You also write about relationships as a source of magic. How do you see them as building blocks of life?
So I think relationships happen whenever you engage with somebody. It
Correct?
can be as simple as going to the grocery store and expressing gratitude, saying thank you, or saying have a nice day. It's an expression of
Hmm.
goodwill. So
Hmm.
that's a very kind of limited relationship.
Hmm.
When you go to work, you have relationships that might be just about work,
Hmm.
but you are involved in a collaborative effort. So you're sharing intellect, you're sharing the vision for the work. So you're having intellectual sharing. There is a little
Hmm.
bit more of a relationship with that. And then with friends, you share what makes you happy. You share what your feelings are. You might talk about your goals for your life, your vision for
Hmm.
your life. So there's much more of a coming together of all the aspects that make life interesting, and there can
Hmm.
be magic there. And then when relationships are truly magical, is when you come together with somebody that all of those aspects of your life, your
Hmm.
personality, your intellect, your emotional context, when all of those things align with somebody,
Hmm.
that's where a relationship can be truly magical.
Hmm.
And so there's a lot of opportunity for magic in relationships, but
Hmm.
again, it comes back to being open to that and
Yeah.
being mindful of that.
Yeah. Yeah. My next question is, how can people nurture deeper connections in an increasingly distracted world?
Yeah, it's interesting. In modern times, there's never been more distractions. We're
Correct.
constantly connected through email and text. We have a constant stream of social media and television and
Mm,
advertisements. So it's very easy to be distracted if you let yourself. So I think that's, to me, that really underscores the importance of living intentionally and
mm,
living proactively.
mm,
Because if you do live with intention, that means everything you're doing, you know why you're doing it and you know how it fits into your life.
right.
And I would say there's nothing wrong with being distracted because sometimes we can feel overwhelmed and sometimes we can feel like we need downtime. And there's
Mm,
nothing wrong with occupying your brain for a little while
yep.
in a distracted way,
Mm,
but you have to be intentional about that. And there has to be, you want boundaries set on. You don't want emotional triggers in there. So there has to be limits and there has to be boundaries.
mm,
And so if you can control those distractions, then you come back to what's important. And what's important is life and the people in it. And so it's nurturing those deeper connections through the intentional life and of being intentional about the distractions.
fascinating. How do you suggest people handle blocks in their lives that don't fit together?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think everybody in their life will have ebbs and flows. Like
Correct.
sometimes work becomes more.
Yeah.
There's so much work that you feel like you're not spending enough time with your friends and family. And I think sometimes you can feel your energy is not always the same. So your personal energy can ebb and flow, and sometimes you feel like, oh, I just don't have it in me today. And I think that's natural and normal. But if you feel like that a lot, then that might be a red flag. So you might think, oh, I'm really doing something at work. I'm really uncomfortable with that. And, sometimes that happens at work where it's like, this is not really my strength. I'm not sure I should be doing that.
Mm,
I'm not the best person for that job. Um, but I think the red flag is where that happens a lot. If that happens all the time, that's where self reflection comes into play
mm,
again. And you can really think, is this the right thing for me to be doing? Is this the right job? Am I not spending enough time on my passions? Am I
mm,
not challenging myself? So I think is if you're mindful of your emotional context with your experiences
mm,
and you engage in self-reflection, you can resolve those times when some of your blocks of life
mm,
don't seem to align.
mm. Amazing. How do you balance ambition and contentment when designing an intentional life?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I really think, being ambitious to me means you're passionate about achieving a goal.
Mm,
And so if you think of that goal as the one and only end result of your efforts, then you might feel, oh, I'm not good enough, I'm failing. So I think the answer to that is being open and to learn from whatever outcome occurs.
mm,
So thinking of being ambitious as a process rather than I'm going to do this that will result in this.
mm.
So to me it's like when you're not happy with something in life, it's like,
Yeah.
well, that's reality and you can't fight reality.
Mm,
So if you're open to whatever outcomes arise from your experiences and your efforts,
mm,
then you will always be content even if you haven't yet achieved your goals.
mm. Well said. And how can people move from just coping with life to truly creating the life they want?
Well, I think part of that is perspective, and then
Mm,
part of that is intentionality. I'm
mm.
talking a lot about
Correct.
intentionality because
Correct.
intentionality is weaves all through this
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah.
But the perspective idea is if you're dissatisfied with something about your life,
Mm,
that may be because that thing is not right for your life or you're not putting enough time into it. But it also may be that um, you don't have the right perspective. If
mm,
something's happening and it teaches you something about yourself, or it teaches you something about what you do, then you should be content with that, even if it makes you feel, a negative emotion.
mm,
It can help you actually build the life you want because you're constantly learning
mm,
about
mm,
your experiences, about
mm,
yourself, about your emotional framework. And through that, that helps you be in a much better position to continue to build the life you want.
Well said. Pete, I have time for two more questions. Do
Okay.
you think intentional living is a privilege or can it be practiced regardless of circumstances?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. And um, I would say when I think about people of means, I think that there are certain things that are kind of common in their
Mm,
lives.
mm,
One is that they focus on their wealth. They focus on money, either making it or keeping it.
mm,
And another is they might have a public perception kind of priority. They might drive a fancy car, they might have a big house, and they have to maintain those things. So I think a person of means might be less able to have a meaningful life because they already have these things in place
mm,
that are possibly pushing out the meaningful things in their life. Whereas a person who may have an intentional life because they have no other choice. I have to figure this out because I
mm.
don't have any other choice.
Yeah.
Excuse me. That person, can build. I'm not saying a person of means can't build a meaningful life, but they have to be aware
Mm,
of 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 how they can get past these other things to
mm,
find a life of meaning. And I think a person who doesn't have wealth or means um, can can always find a meaningful life, but they have to have a good perspective on their challenges and learn from their challenges. So I think an intentional life is available to everybody, and
correct.
it just kind of depends on your perspective and the way you approach it.
Amazing. And my last question for you, Pete. What is one core message you hope every reader or listener will take away from Blocks of Life?
So I think the main thing that I want people to understand is that they're in the driver's seat.
Mm,
They are in charge of their life.
mm,
Everybody has challenges and heartaches along the way that they have to deal with. But at the end of the day, you are responsible for your life. Nobody else has that responsibility.
mm,
So to me, that's kind of a bottom line message with Blocks of Life.
mm. Well said. And on that note, Pete, I just want to say what an amazing conversation this has been on life, on the journey of life, on the blocks of life. I just loved your three life building blocks, which were connections, adventures, and life's work. Thank you for speaking to me about your blog, Blocks of Life. I'll ask all my viewers and listeners to go and check out Pete's blog, Blocks of Life. I must mention there is so much wealth of knowledge and information in Pete's blog. I think we covered some very fascinating ground on intentional living, about relationships, and about, of course, connections and life. Thank you for speaking to me, and good luck to you.
It was a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.